Okay, we'll begin. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Dorothy Chambers. I'm the program director at Candle's Holocaust Museum and Education Center. Today marks the first in a week of programs on Holocaust and genocide, titled Night of Broken Glass, Remembering the Holocaust. Night of Broken Glass is the result of collaboration between Indiana State University and Candle's Holocaust Museum. And we are really honored to be here tonight at United Hebrew Congregation for two presentations. The first is My Memories of Kristall Nacht, and the second is titled Czech Survivor, number 32379. The term Night of Broken Glass is the English translation of the German word Kristallnacht, referring to the violent events that took place in Germany and Austria 77 years ago today. What a more meaningful a way to learn about Kristallnacht than from a person who witnessed the events in person himself. Tonight, Mr. Walter Sommers will share his memories of what he and his family experienced that November of 1938. Following Walter's presentation, Mr. Scott Skillman will introduce us to an intriguing story of a Torah that today securely rests here at the temple, but which has a harrowing story of its own to tell. Please be sure your electronic devices are turned off or silenced. I think following both presentations, there will be a reception. We hope you'll stay and mingle and ask questions. And there's also a pad of paper on the back table, I think for people to sign if you're interested in learning more about events that take place here at the temple. So, without further ado, Walter Sommers.
I'm sorry you have to accept the fact that I have to be seated while I'm talking, but I'm trying to protect my voice in such a way that you can hear me all right. My name is Walter Sommers, and I'm born and raised in Frankfurt, Germany. My parents were people who only knew one country, that was Germany, going back 3 or 4 generations. I can trace my family back to about 1820, 1830, when one of my forefathers built a house and it was able to get some land and build a house, raise some cattle, and grow small crops about maybe 150 miles north and east of the city of Frankfurt, Frankfurt on the Main in Germany. My parents had the wonderful foresight that I should learn foreign languages. My father only spoke German. My mother had some knowledge of French and English, but basically the language spoken in our home, in my grandparents' home, was German. And it had to be proper German. No dialect was tolerated. So I was sent to a very fine gymnasium-type school where we went to class 6 days a week. I don't think we had more than maybe 6 weeks of vacation throughout the whole year. We had a lot of homework every night. And at age 10, I had to study French. At age 11, I had to study English. At age 12, I had to study Spanish. The Nazis came to power in 1933. There was lots of discrimination. It was very obvious that my future would be very dim. At the age of 17, I decided to leave home, and I became an apprentice at a small export-import company in the beautiful city of Hamburg, Germany, the main export city in Central Europe at that particular point in time. I knew this would give me an occasion to further my knowledge of English and Spanish, and also I was really determined to leave Germany with all the discrimination job discrimination against Jewish people that was in place long before the Holocaust started. So, as a result, consequently, on a Thursday night, it was November 9th, 1938, we were on our way home. There was another apprentice with me. We were riding bicycles. And, but I must say, prior to that, I had learned that some terrible things could happen, but we had no idea what it might be. I was a member of a Jewish Benebrith youth group, and we had learned that some Jewish people who were not German citizens, who had immigrated from Poland in 1919, when that part of Germany had to be given to Poland, had moved into Germany and had never acquired their German citizenship. We were told that there is a potential possibility for problems. Well, sure enough, it was sometime in October. These people were given 48 hours to pack their belongings, get on designated trains, and they were shipped back to Poland. Well, Poland decided, the Polish government decided, they left Germany in the early 20s, they're not coming back to Poland. And the train stood in no man's land for several days. Well-meaning Catholic Polish people brought some food and drink, but it was not sufficient to keep everybody healthy and alive. The son of one of the victims who died on these trains, happened to live in Paris, France, and he became so angry he got himself a gun and took a shot at a German embassy official. And that occurred during the first week in November. I would say probably around November 2nd or 3rd. Well, the Nazi government said, we will not stand for that. We're not going to let these damn Jews shoot down our ambassadors. And so, here we are, on the afternoon of November 9th, 1938. We were on our way home on bicycles. I had a good Christian friend who was with me, and this is what we saw. It was dirty mobs of people with crowbars and sledgehammers smashing the display windows of retail stores belonging to Jewish merchants, throwing merchandise out in the street. Police were standing by. Stormtroopers in brown uniforms stood around and were laughing, and the mob just did their job. And it was an unreal experience for us. We managed to get our bicycles through this mob of people, and we were on our way home. And a little bit further down the street, we became aware of the fact that a synagogue had been set afire. The fire department was there, but stormtroopers prevented the fire department from putting the fire out. During that night, they burned down 275 synagogues all over Germany. To date, they have rebuilt about half of them. But when I visited Germany several years ago, we took a little trip to the southern part of Germany, and we stopped at a small town, and the tour guide very proudly wanted to show us one of the rebuilt synagogues. And when I asked them, when do they have services here? The answer was, we would love to have services, however, there are no Jewish people living here. Before the Nazis came to power, there were about 400,000 Jewish people living in Germany out of a total German population of about 45 million, so a little less than 1%. At that particular time in 1938, there were about 300,000 Jewish people living in Germany. So we went on home, and when I got home, I was renting a room from a very nice Christian landlady. She said, "You may not be safe here," because word had spread that police had entered some of the Jewish homes and had arrested Jewish men and taken them down to the police station. So fortunately, I had some good friends who happened to have Romanian citizenship, and they called me and invited me, and I stayed with them. However, during that same night, they arrested all the Jewish men that they could possibly find, including my father. And my father's arrest was in a very peculiar way. Like I said, my parents lived in the city of Frankfurt, and it was a little bit before midnight that a friendly policeman came to my parents' home and told my father he should get ready to come down to the police station. And he happened to know my father from way back. And so there is this picture of the policeman, my father and my mother sitting in the kitchen around midnight having an early breakfast. My father was taken down to the police station where there were quite a few other Jewish men who had already been arrested, and they were eventually turned over to a group of stormtroopers who marched them in a very violent manner to a train station, and my father was taken to the Buchenwald concentration camp. The pattern of destruction in Germany during that night on November 9th very, very widely. While some of the Jewish-owned retail stores were very badly managed on November 9th, and merchandise was thrown out in the street, most of the homes in the city of Frankfurt were untouched in the area where my parents lived. But in other areas, stormtroopers invaded private homes, threw furniture out the window, and beat people up. So the next day, I got a call from my employer, and they said I should not come to work. Of course, it happened to be on a Friday morning, but they were very, very supportive. They said, "You will keep working," and they had me working on ocean-going ships. So I was very safe there, and I took care of documentation and supervised the loading of merchandise that we were exporting to South American countries. This was the beginning of the Holocaust, and in some cities things went from bad to worse. Eventually, my father and other people and other men were released when we put through emigration. And fortunately, my parents had applied for immigration to the United States, and our papers came through, and we were able to leave Germany in January 1939. This was only the beginning. Unfortunately, the way it played out of a population of 400,000 Jews, only about barely 100,000 were alive in Germany at the end of World War II. They had been, many of them had, through intermarriage, were able to hide with their Christian families, and so their life was saved. But the total was that 6 million Jews were killed, and 12 million Christians. This is a fact that is very little known. Now, the question was, who were the Christians who were killed? Well, first of all, there were German people who disagreed with the Nazis. All you had to do is open your mouth and show some disagreement or ask questions, and that was a reason to be put in the cattle car and shipped to places like Auschwitz. And your chances were very good that you were gassed or killed in some other way. The other Christians who were killed, they might have had a Jewish grandfather or Jewish grandmother. They had different degrees. But it was the most horrible scene. And that's about all I can tell you about Kristallnacht. And I think this is something that we should never forget. We should know that it was these events. The Nazis were actually looking for an excuse, and they found the excuse when a Jewish man in Paris became so enraged about the way his family was treated that he felt himself compelled to take a shot at the German embassy official and kill him. If that hadn't happened, they probably would have found some other excuse. But it was just the beginning of Hitler's idea to kill all the Jews in Europe, and he almost pretty much succeeded. Thank you very much for listening. Do you have any questions?
Answer some questions, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone have questions for Walter?
Any question regarding the Holocaust?
I have one.
Yeah?
As I was researching, I found that Germany issued official numbers that only 100 Jews were killed the night of Kristallnacht. That was the official number. 90 actually.
100 Jews were killed the night of the...
Kristallnacht. That was the official German number. Was your experience that...
I didn't know that any numbers were available. Yeah. I don't know. I can't comment on that. I don't know. I have no... I know that it varied from area to area. In the state of Bavaria, things were a lot worse than they were around the city of Frankfurt. It's very hard to tell, really. Also know I had an uncle living in Cologne, which is in the Rhineland, and he was hardly aware that anything was going on. So it varied, but it just varied from area to area. I know one thing, the people who did all that harm in the city of Hamburg were not citizens of the city of Hamburg. We could tell by the way they spoke German that they had come from further east, and I was told that they were from Berlin, the capital of Germany. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, was Kristallnacht after the Anschluss with Austria?
Oh, yeah. Austria was annexed in March 1938. 38 is really the critical year. In March 1938, German troops marched into Austria, and if you go to Austria nowadays, you hear that they were very unhappy with the German occupation. But I know different. I know that some of the Austrian women were handing flowers to the arriving German soldiers. And that was depicted in the newspapers in the city of Hamburg at that particular point in time. That was in March. But worse things happened, really. I mean, 1938 was just a horrible year. It was in August 1938, at the Munich conference, that Mr. Hitler decided that Germany was entitled to have the eastern part of the Czech Republic, which were German-speaking people, Sudeten Germans. And representatives of France and England just caved in and said, Mr. Hitler, those were the very words. If that will make you happy, move your troops in. And 1/3 of Czechoslovakia became part of Nazi Germany. All of Europe just caved into Hitler. It was an unbelievable thing, really. And then, in fact, the head of the British government, Mr. Chamberlain, maybe you've heard that name before, he went back to London, England, and he announced peace in our time. That's how they felt in August 1938.
Did your father tell you much about his treatment while he was?
He was in the concentration camp for 4 weeks. He came back ashen gray. His head had been shorn. He didn't want to talk about anything, but eventually, over time, I heard that concentration camps at that point in time were not to be compared with what concentration camps turned out later on. It was just horrible places where people had no rights. For instance, they would not get any water all day long, and then eventually at night they would be given some herring to eat. You can imagine that, and no water. So the thirst was tremendous. You know, they were made to stand at attention maybe for 2 or 3 hours. In the cold of November. That's the kind of stuff. So of course people got sick and some people died, but the important thing is anybody who was sent to a concentration camp at that point in time had no rights whatsoever and no protection.
Your father was how old when he was there?
Pardon?
How old was your father at that time?
At that time, let's see, he was born in 87, so that was 51. He was 51.
Were your grandparents still alive?
Yeah, pardon?
Were your grandparents still alive?
No, my grandparents were not alive anymore at that point in time. Yeah, right. Well, it was very fortunate. My parents, I had persuaded my parents that it was hard time to think about leaving Germany, and they did that very, very reluctantly because my father only spoke German, my mother spoke some English and some French. They said I should leave Germany and go wherever I could go because you have to understand, immigrating legally to the United States in 1938 was very complicated. Number one, you had to come in under the quota, and the quota at that point in time officially was about 24,000 German citizens per year, but because of heavy unemployment, they reduced that to 15,000. So that's one thing. The other thing is you had to have a living relative. So now I'm asking you, do you have a living relative in Germany? Probably not. Well, we didn't have a living relative in America that we knew. But through a cousin once removed, he gave us the address of a cousin of his living in New Jersey. And my parents, thank goodness, wrote to him, I think, back in July or August at my urging. And he wrote back, yes, I'm going to send you an affidavit. And also wrote him a letter, please don't ask us for a penny. Yeah, my parents lost all their savings, but we were permitted to take all household goods and all furniture and artwork, anything like that with us. And In fact, the most precious thing that we came to America with was a Leica camera. Yeah. Now, if I'm permitted, I'd like to talk about what it was like for us to come to America at that point in time. We landed, well, first of all, I want to talk about leaving Germany. Before you could go, even think about going to, immigrating to America, you had to go to an American consulate for a physical examination, physical and mental examination. America did not want any immigrants who were physically or mentally deficient. So all of us passed very, very well, and my father was in very bad physical condition, but the American consul just looked at him and said, "Oh, you're okay." So that was the luckiest thing that could happen. And now, another incredible thing that happened when we were on the train and at the border, we were sitting in a compartment. In Germany, they had compartments on trains. A 6-foot-tall SS man came in a black uniform and demanded to see our papers. Well, of course, our papers were okay. And then he made a long speech about such nice people as my parents and my sister and I were leaving Germany. He said it was such a shame. It was Germany's loss for us to leave. And my parents couldn't believe that kind of talk coming from an SS man. So that was the last German person that we spoke to on our way to America. Now let me tell you what it was like coming to America, and this is very important to remember. We were on a small boat and landed in Hoboken, New Jersey in January 1939. And on board were some German Nazis with big swastikas in their lapel. And when the ship docked, the American immigration official came aboard and he spotted the Nazis with their swastikas, and he said, "These people come off first." And he barely looked at their papers, barely. I think he spent about 5 minutes. And then there was a group of my parents and 4 or 5 other families, and they asked me to be the spokesperson at that time, because my English was a little bit better than anybody else's. And the questions that were asked, whether my father ever had been a member of the Communist Party. Well, of course not. And then the other question that was asked, whether my father had ever attempted to overthrow the Nazi government. Those were the questions asked by an American immigration official. And eventually he permitted us to set foot on American soil. Amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
Why is it, do you think, that the Nazis
I
got
beg your
special
pardon?
treatment? Why did the Nazis get special treatment?
That's another good question. From 1934 on up, the Nazi government was America's #1 friend. Now try to understand that. The American government had better relationships with Berlin and the Nazi government than with the French or the English. And one of the main reasons was that Germany had the strongest army in 1934, 1935, and was the strongest bulwark against Russian communism. The Russians under Stalin had thousands of tanks and thousands of warplanes. And before Hitler came to power, Germany was forbidden to have tanks or planes. And so after the Nazis came to power and rearmed and tore up the Treaty of Versailles, Germany became the #1 defense between the capitalist West and Russian and communist Russia. But Nazi Germany was #1 with the American State Department.
Well, I'd like
That's
to
another
think that
fact
maybe
that we had fun.
I'd like to think maybe we were following the policy of keep your friends close and your enemy even closer.
Exactly. And I'm here to tell you, I'm a combat veteran of World War II in the American Army. And after the Nazis invaded Poland in August